Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Matt. You're watching Broke Rednecks Prepping. We're coming to you today from Spur, Texas, more specifically my carport. Anyway, I want to do a little video for especially the newer preppers out there because a lot of places are starting to ease their shutdowns after the coronavirus situation. And questions kind of coming up. Has it passed? Has it not passed? Have we actually flattened the curve and gotten everything safe? And some of the newer preppers that I see out there and I talk to are kind of wondering what their next action should be. Now, guys that have been prepping for a while, most of this is going to be the kind of stuff you already do. But for your newer folks, see if I can give you a little advice. The first thing we have to look at as preppers is information. It's not enough to watch Fox News and just assume that we've got it all. We need to be checking multiple sources. As it applies to the coronavirus situation, we need to be comparing what narratives and what information we're getting from official sources to other information. And I say that not because I think the CDC or somebody's out to get us, to be clear. I'm a fairly practical guy. I say that because this is an unprecedented event. We're still learning about this virus. And as much as one group of really good sources will tell you something, other groups will tell you something else. Let's bear in mind that early on, the CDC and the WHO didn't think wearing masks would help. Now they're recommending masks for people going outside. There are a lot of things that have had to change, and I don't necessarily think it's incompetence on their part. Even if I did, YouTube would demonetize this video if I said that. I think what it is it's a growing fluid situation, and we need to be embracing what information we can get. Now, for those of you who've been watching this channel for a little bit, you probably know that I took a hiatus from YouTube because I ran for Congress. Now, I've been charting the coronavirus since early January. See, my niece was my campaign manager, and her job while I was driving from place to place was to look up off-the-wall stories. I did not want to go to one of these forums or a town hall meeting and get blindsided by some developing story that I couldn't read because I was driving. And we started watching coronavirus in China when it still only had, it was less than 1,000 confirmed cases and not all that many deaths. So I've had a pretty good feel for the numbers, but this is the kind of thing that your average person who's trying to figure out what they should be doing from a prepping standpoint needs to be looking at. Take a look at what's being said in the news, what's being said at press conferences by your local leaders, state and national. Then compare that with what you're seeing with the Johns Hopkins numbers that are posted and that sort of thing. Now, as far as what to do, a lot of folks are saying there's going to be a second wave coming in the fall. And they are highly trained professionals with great medical educations. Far be it of me to disagree with them. But the logic behind that has been to date that there's going to be a lull in the summer because this particular virus, which they keep comparing to the flu, doesn't, they think, like hot weather. The problem with that I see, and this evidence is of course anecdotal, is we have Ecuador and Brazil are really starting to pop. Brazil is moving up rapidly. In the last couple of weeks, Brazil, who did not really take this seriously, is, when I checked it earlier today, well over 90,000 cases. They're on pace to get into the top 5 or 6 countries worldwide fairly shortly. They're moving up dramatically. Sky News had a story about their digging mass graves in Sao Paulo. Now, Manaus, another city in Brazil, which is 600 miles or something from Sao Paulo, but it's in the Amazon where it is literally never cold. They're getting hammered too. And something we need to consider is this is a new enough virus that our professionals looking at this very possibly, if not probably, are still behind the curve on predicting it. So we as preppers need to seize this opportunity when things are opening back up to go out and go ahead and start continuing our preps. Now, you've probably seen news stories, and CNN had one recently, and I've seen it in a few other places, talking about possible meat shortages for the summer. It looks like the feds are trying to address that, but if I were a prepper getting kind of new at this and didn't have a lot of things stockpiled, I would want to hone up on groceries. At this point, I don't think it's irresponsible for your average prepper to have a couple months' supply of food on hand. Because I know in Texas, we just registered 1,000 cases yesterday. Our case numbers, I know our politicians are saying they're flattening, but when I look at the chart, I'm not seeing it go flat, so you can draw your own conclusions. There's a very good possibility that some of these states, and especially with larger states like Texas, that are opening up, that we're going to start seeing if not statewide outbreaks, at least isolated outbreaks. In Texas, to use an example, I'm the most familiar with that. Dallas and Houston are really starting to pop, but so are some of the just off the wall cities. Like in Amarillo, they're getting a lot of cases. There's a little town, Dumas, which is up in Moore County in the Panhandle. The whole county is like 22,000 people, but they've got nearly 400 cases. And so we're going to see some isolated pockets like that at the very least, I believe, where you may see shutdowns come back into place as early as June 1st. For those of you who are unemployed, you're probably getting the CARE Act money. Use it wisely. Don't go out and buy a big screen. Use it to make sure you have what you need to survive the summer and possibly the fall. But I would start with a 2-month supply of food. The second thing that I would look at is there's a lot of good data and a lot of really good professionals out there telling folks to wear masks in public. It doesn't necessarily stop the individual wearing the mask from getting it. It will cut back on the viral load. But what it does brilliantly is it keeps the virus from spreading from somebody who is asymptomatic and doesn't know they have it. Now, I saw a meme online that talked about if we all walk around naked and one guy peed, he'd probably pee on your leg and there'd be no protection. If you're wearing pants, your leg would get wet, but it would still stop some. If he's wearing pants, well, all the pee stays with him. And that's kind of a crude analogy, but at the same time, it actually works. So I would plan on, if I were a new prepper, even when everybody else is taking their PPE off and enjoying the summer, I would still be wearing a mask. I would make sure that I had stocked up on hand sanitizer. That's a big way this seems to be spreading, is through contact. I'd want to sanitize my hands early. I'd do it often. And just think of Wilford Brimley, diabetes. Think back to his commercials. Check your blood sugar early, check it often. I'll do the same thing with hand sanitizer. I would also stock up on some of that. We saw a run on some things like toilet paper. I don't really think we will again because a lot of people bought toilet paper they can't do anything with. So, and they haven't used it up. However, we are very probably going to see a run on hand sanitizer as it comes in. And I would want to make sure that I had at least a couple months supply of that. I got some hand sanitizer into the house the other day that I ordered from a distillery, but I still can't get your normal stuff like Purell or your normal surgical masks. So we've actually started manufacturing our own. And as a side note, that's probably a good way to help your local economies. Buy face masks from some of these people making them. There are a lot of folks out of work, a lot of folks whose businesses are taking a hickey right now. They could use a little extra money from somebody buying some face masks off of them. It's healthy, it's hygienic, but it's also good for the economy, and the economy's taking a beating. We really need to be watching that. But I would also want to be watching the economy. Let's bear in mind, we've got huge unemployment numbers. I don't want to state a specific one because as I check different sources, I'm getting different numbers, but the one thing they all agree on is that it's really bad. Very possibly Great Depression bad. Now, obviously, if they flip a switch and open everything up, well, obviously everybody's going to go back to work and it's going to be fine, except I don't really think so. I may be wrong, I'm not an economist, but I find that awfully hard to believe, especially when New York, according to de Blasio, is going to have to stay shut down probably for a couple months. We're going to see some economic turmoil. So I would want to prepare my finances, make sure I had some cash on hand. If you've got the cash on hand and you want to invest, talk to a professional about where to put it, be it gold, silver, certain type of stocks that you can put money into, or some other investment. But I'd want to make sure that money was secure while you can. The government just borrowed a lot of money to dump into the economy, and that's probably going to have some inflationary effects. That's something we need to be looking at. Now, a third aspect I would look at, if the press is to be believed and we're going to have some food shortages, I have a hard time getting there as good as our ag system is, but our country's logistics probably could use some work, so it is possible. However, if you've got the food, you've got your money taken care of, you've got your personal protective equipment, gloves, some hand sanitizer, masks, that sort of thing, I would want to look at something for defense. And I wouldn't just go out and buy a gun. You can get some intermediate uses of force. Think a pepper spray, a taser here. We don't have to shoot everybody. But I'd still would get a gun, but I'd get the other stuff too. But I would want to invest in self and home defense. If we do in fact have food shortages, and if we are going to have to keep the border shut down, bear in mind, there's possibly going to be some hungry people out there that may envy what you have. or may just assume you have something because you have a nicer car and a nicer house. But also, let's keep in mind, there's going to be a whole lot of junkies out there that can't get their usual money to buy crack or meth or whatever they want. And we're already seeing a peak in crime rates. Houston, who's been locked down, I believe, has a 30% increase in burglaries. Homicides are up too. We're seeing a lot of your property and your theft-based crime moving up dramatically quick. I would want to invest a little bit of my money into something defensive. Again, pepper spray and taser. Let's get some intermediate use of forces. We don't need to be shooting everybody. But I would also want to invest in a good firearm. If you already have some guns, now is the time to invest in some training. Now, I'm not here to advocate for any one organization's training, but there's some good stuff out there. It's not enough to have a gun in your house. You need to know how to clear corners. You need to know how to avoid fatal funnels like a doorway, that sort of thing. If you're carrying a concealed weapon in public, legally of course, it's also helpful to take a little training on how to draw it quickly, practice with it. Not everything that preppers do has to cost money. Some of it can merely be time, sweat capital as it were. So I'd want to spend a little bit of the time we have on preparing for those sorts of things, making sure my training's honed up. If the ranges open up, wear your PPE, but go to the range, tighten up. If you can buy some more ammunition, the first thing you do before you buy it is you call me and you tell me where to get it because they're all sold out around here. And then the second thing you do is buy it for yourself. However, stock up on a little ammo. Now might be a good time to learn to reload. But I would want to put a little energy into myself in home defense. Anybody who's got preps, however modest they may be, and for those of you new to prepping, I know there are a lot of channels who think you should have started prepping 20 years ago and that the government's going to come get you Thursday by noon. I'm not one of those people. The best time to plant a tree, according to Sun Tzu or Confucius, was in fact 20 years ago. The second best time is today. So let's embrace that. Let's carpe a little diem, as it were. Now, with that in mind, even if you have modest preps, come up with a plan. Think of what you need. Think of what you'd like to have. Because we're going to need protective equipment. We're going to need food. We're going to need stuff for home defense. We're going to need to secure our financial stability. Lastly, I would want to start prepping, and this would go to the bottom of the list. But if this thing has taught us anything, it's that being stuck at the house for days at a time, is going to drive people crazy. Even if you more or less get along with folks, you can't get out and do what you want. I mean, trust me, I think there's going to be a whole lot of pregnancies and divorces when this is over, and maybe with the same people. But when you look at that, you crank people into something. There's a reason there's so much drama in places like prison or places like that where people live in a very congested situation. And when you take out their ability to travel, go do something, go see something, you start to wear out them. They're stuck in those four walls. I know a lot of people who are on lockdowns that are not able to even go to work. I mean, they're stuck at home, so they're not leaving the house for days at a time. We sometimes take for granted being able to go to work or go to the grocery store on a regular basis or go bowling with our friends or whatever. I would want to come up with something recreational that people in your household can enjoy doing, and individually and together. Come up with some books, movies, games, whatever, I don't know. Think of something. You know your family, I don't. I mean, I'm looking at a cell phone with my niece giving me funny faces because she's probably tired of me after a month and a half. But whatever works for you. But come up with something for entertainment. The one thing preppers so rarely talk about is mental health. And sometimes mental health is blown off a little steam. You know, if you've got a little extra money, now is the time to get that piece of exercise equipment or an elliptical or Bowflex you can do at home. Now's probably the time to add a few books to your collection or get that Netflix or Hulu subscription. Let's do some stuff whether if there is a lockdown, whether it's official or whether it's just something people have to do because their cases blow up. I would want to be prepared for that too, because there are places in the country that have been locked down for a couple months and people are starting to get a little crazy. So let's come up with a way that they can go less crazy. Lastly is communication. Now we all have cell phones, that sort of thing. We can all FaceTime. But look at some of these things, like what are they, the Zoom meetings, that sort of thing, where you can actually have group conversations. It's one thing to talk to somebody on the phone. It's a whole nother thing to go somewhere, I don't know, dinner with family or friends where there's 7 or 8 people all carrying on conversations and hanging out. Where we may not be able to do that as much as we would like in person for the foreseeable future, let's find a way to do it digitally. My family did that recently. It was my first time to do that sort of thing, and frankly, it was pretty cool. We all got to talk, we all got to laugh at each other. I got to see how goofy my dad's beard is. And seriously, Dad, if you're watching, I mean, the Magnum PI stash that you've been rocking for like 40 years, go back to it. I mean, it's not really hit, but go back to it. Anyway, as for the rest of y'all who are growing beards, have fun with that. But it was actually kind of cool to see the whole family together, to see them talking, and just see us all interact. Something like that may be useful. Anyway, in kind of conclusion, we want to prioritize. We need food, make sure you have a couple months supply. We need personal protective equipment, PPE, masks, hand sanitizer, and gloves especially, at least masks and hand sanitizer. And I'd want to have enough of the disposable parts of it that you feel comfortable for at least a couple months. It's very important. The only way we beat this thing is by literally beating this thing. I'd want to make sure that you had your finances figured out. Don't go blowing all your money on eBay. It's tempting to go buy 15 new baseball jerseys. Limit it to like 3 or 4. Again, people laughing at me. But because some of us had a lot of fun on eBay. But the point is, limit your expenditures and prioritize it. Even if you're getting a little extra money from unemployment right now, let's not abuse it. Now is the time to be prepping. So get your finances in order, because we may be in for a rough summer and fall, not just fall. Make sure you have something for home defense. And if you already have something for home defense, don't be like, cool, I am man, I have gun, or woman and gun. Make sure you've got some intermediate stuff, and make sure that if you already have it, you're training with it and preparing with it. Skills get rusty just like a sword does. If you don't keep them well honed, let's get out and do that. So make sure we have something, and we're thinking ahead to putting some things in our household for our mental health or physical health if you want to do exercise equipment, but especially mental health. We don't want to go crazy. And let's make sure that we're coming up with better ways to communicate. It is getting way too easy to just feel like we're all alone, even though they're on the phone all day. Got a couple of kids here, seriously, all day they're on the phone, and they act like they haven't seen anybody in months. So make sure you've got some of this figured out. Anyway, that's my 2 cents on how to prepare for what's coming with the COVID-19 crisis. Guys, I'm not the great Maha here. If you have some ideas or something you want to add to it, do please like, comment, and by the way, subscribe. That really helps me out a lot. If you like it, it helps me out a lot. But throw this in the comments. Let me know what you think. I'm happy to hear it because, well, you may know something I don't. Anyway, my name's Matt. This is Broke Rednecks Prepping. See you next time.